Hello, 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 it's Fran here. Hope you're doing good. Today we've got another episode of MTGO Online Odric Adventures. So, of course, that means I'll be piloting Odric, no surprises there. But our opponents are going to be piloting the Sliver Hivelord, Experiment Kraj, and Lathril, Blade of the Elves. So, Sliver Hivelord on the threat assessment scale is high. Very, very high. One of my very good friends actually has Sliver Hivelord as their commander, and left unchecked, it is a very effective tribal deck. I mean, other people may prefer to use the tutoring Slither as the kind of front runner of the deck. But I honestly think that the Hivelord is just so strong in the command zone. Like, being able to give all of your creatures indestructible repeatedly is just very, very strong. Very nice. As for Experimental Kraj, I said experimental. I might say that a couple of times because I kept thinking it was experimental, but it's just experiment. Experiment Kraj. So clearly kind of a +1/+1 type deck, and I'm sure there are some shenanigans to be had with the fact that it can take other creatures' abilities. And in Simic colours, that's a very strong combo, so we'll have to see what that deck is bringing. And then last but not least, Lathril, which is one of the more recent, as of the recording of this video, pre-con tribal elf decks from Kaldheim, I believe. Looks really good, and I think it's probably going to be strong because elves, man. But I want to take a moment to talk about this card, Crystalline Giant. I adore this card, and I just love all of the keyword soup on it. It's one of the only instances in the deck that we can actually get Menace and Reach, which are surprisingly hard to get in mono white. Even with equipment, a lot of the cards just aren't really good enough to be in the deck. But I love this card. It's just, to me, it's got Commander card written all over it. There's an element of randomness to it. And yeah, whilst it may have been better to play Burnished Heart on turn 3, I just wanted to get it down as quick as I could to start getting those keywords. And I think the first one we got here is actually Vigilance, which is a nice one. Let's see how many we can get. So no surprise is that the Sliver player is playing Slithers out, and the Explorer's Scope is a nice way for them to get their colours and lands. Yeah! So when I saw Lathril, and I thought, who am I going to use as the sort of cameo character, Zelda just had to be the one. And I think, seeing as it's a sort of Golgari colour combination, the Twilight Princess version of Zelda seemed best fitting. She's my personal favourite Zelda anyway, so that was an easy choice for me. Yeah, so Lone Rider as well, by the way, is a pretty sweet card in Odric. Unfortunately, when it does transform, it would no longer be white, so any cards that only buff white creatures, which we have maybe 1 or 2 instances of that, means that it won't get those buffs, unfortunately. But the keywords and life gain synergies and low casting cost are more than enough to keep it in the deck, I think. So yeah, interestingly though, of course, we're going to see tons of elves from Lathril, and we're going to see tons of slivers from the Sliver Hivelord. So even though we're not worried about not knowing what they're trying to do, it's a case of being able to deal with it, because especially with the Sliver Hivelord, it can get around board wipes quite easily once the commander's down. With my current build, I don't actually have any mass exiling board wipes like Settle the Wreckage, which is amazing and underplayed and one of the best few cards that can deal with slivers. Yeah, I just don't have that yet, unfortunately. There's another one as well. There's like at least 2 other mass board wipes in white that exile. But with Odric in mind and trying to give our board indestructible, we have opted for destroy all creature type board wipes. So that may be our undoing in this case, but yeah. And we have drawn into the Felidar Sovereign. So, for those of you that don't know, with Excavation Zone, I think it's called, which we have in play currently, it allows you to cast your next spell at flash speed, as long as you sacrifice it and spend some mana and tap it. So this is actually really good with Felidar Sovereign. At some point I'm going to do an Odric deck tech, because I spent a lot of time and energy trying to fine-tune this deck and make it as good as I could, and I'd love to share that with you guys. But Excavation Zone allows you to flash speed in Felidar Sovereign in your opponent's end step before your turn, and then you get to kind of untap, upkeep, and win essentially on the turn that you play it, which is amazing because there's nothing more nail-biting and often difficult to do than survive all of your opponent's turns with a Felidar Sovereign out without it getting blown up. I mean, of course you can give it various protections, but you won't always have those. Anywho, I kind of have missed a lot of what's actually going on in the game. So a little while back I did a sort of asymmetric board wipe to get rid of Lathril's very scary board. However, she had this great enchantment out that's essentially just replaced everything she lost with elf tokens. Still was a good trade-off because some of those elves that they had were very strong with their abilities, but now with a Vanquisher's banner they're all 2/2s, so it's kind of scary still.
Mother Miranda, if it's for you, I'd do anything.
So in honor of Resident Evil 8 Village, which I got recently when it first came out and have thoroughly enjoyed and loved, I realized that I would pay tribute to them with some of the characters in this video, and it actually really works out nicely, having Sliver Hivelord and Experiment Kraj as like 2 characters from the Resident Evil game, because they do kind of want to work together, spoiler alert, at one point. And yeah, I mean, in Commander, politics is a thing and threat assessment is a thing, and sometimes you do need to be, you know, like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So we'll have to see when and why they may band together. But for the time being, we're doing well with land drops. I'm playing Revitalize again because I still had it in the deck at this point. However, it's come in clutch because it did allow me to gain enough life in that turn to finally transform the Lone Rider into It That Rides as 1. Super gross card. I have a personal issue with Eldrazi for violating Innistrad with the Shadows over Innistrad block and Eldritch Moon. Shadows over Innistrad is a very kind of significant set for me. It was the first set that I got to play with Innistrad, and I adore Innistrad. In fact, as I'm sure many of you know, this Odric Lunarch Marshal is from Shadows over Innistrad. So yeah, for me it's a set that really holds a kind of special place in my heart. I just love the theme, the vibe, you know, angels, vampires, werewolves, oh my, all that good stuff. I just love it, love it, love it. So originally I would not have had It That Rises as 1 or Lone Rider in the deck on a pure basis of it being Eldrazi, but as I grew as a player, I came to realize that sometimes you have to, you know, forego personal issues and put things in that are more synergistic. And it's a flavor win anyway, because it's from the set. It's lots of keywords, so I kind of grew to accept it and, you know, deal with the grief of what happened in Shadows and Eldritch Moon in my own way. But yeah, also Skeleton Key is from Shadows. Maybe not the best card, but it does give us Skulk and some form of card draw, which is nice.
Ethan Winters, let's see how special you are.
So yeah, of course, if we were going to have Resident Evil 8 village characters, we'd have to have Lady Demisque. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Such an iconic character. I don't really want to say any spoilers whatsoever with the game, because if anyone's watching this and they haven't played it yet, or, you know, whatever, I would not want to do any spoilers. But I really enjoyed the game, actually. I'm a big Resident Evil fan, and I definitely recommend it. But I'll try and stay on Magic for the most part, because I know that, you know, if you're here to watch, you're here to watch Magic and not necessarily talk about Resident Evil. So yeah, as this game's progressing, we're starting to see some of these shenanigans that Kraj is capable of. This sort of untap and tap, putting +1/+1 counters, seems very strong. Thankfully though, Lathril here is using a sack effect to get rid of Sliver Hivelord, which is one of the few ways of dealing with it, honestly, and we don't really have readily available to us in white. Of course we do have our exiling removal, but just not on hand at the moment. So thanks, Lathril.
God damn it. All this time, I thought I could save my family.
So yeah, we've got our Caged Sun down as well, which is very nice. You know, white is often gets reputation for struggling with mana, and we're going to suit up here with our Skeleton Key and Cartographer's Hawk for our sort of ramping. I know that some people I've seen in various reviews, I guess, say that they don't really like Cartographer's Hawk. I totally get that. But again, mono white, you've got to work with what you've got. And actually, I think it's okay. It's nice that it's a flyer as well for the deck synergy. How do you say that? Mayarl's Aria is alt win con, so got to keep an eye on that as well.
What does that say into me? Oh, go yourself, Diane.
So, unfortunately, Lathril said that they had to go for dinner. I thought I would imply here with that shtick that they just didn't like what they were seeing with the Sliver tutor on a stick over there, and obviously Kraj as well is doing some very sweet synergy shenanigans. So after that board wipe, the elf player wasn't really doing a huge amount, so maybe they just thought screw it, or maybe they did just have to go have dinner. Who am I to question? But yeah, so they did leave, and this is where the spoiler will be referenced again. Unfortunately, at this point, I have managed to become the arch enemy amongst my opponents. It's unclear to me if they're actually friends. I don't remember, unfortunately, if they joined the game at the same time together. But as always, I will post the chat in the game analysis afterwards, and they do kind of allude to being friends, or at the very least preferring each other over me, which was kind of sad. I, you know, as usual, I was trying to be nice, trying to be friendly. Admittedly, and you'll see as I'm saying in the post-game analysis, I did get a little bit salty in this game. I felt a little bit frustrated with my opponents towards the end, and you'll see why. But you know, it wasn't like scream and dive across the table anger. It was just a bit of like, you know, oh, that's annoying. But, you know, I'm sure these kinds of things are going to happen on MTGO sometimes. But anyway, here I tried to be very cheeky, and I tried to flash in Felidar Sovereign on Kraj's end step for that alt-win instant speed realness. But of course I did it into a blue player with untapped mana, and it got countered. So, can't blame me for trying, but yeah, it didn't work, unfortunately. I was so hoping it would. I was excited. I was like, oh my gosh, this was something that I would literally be talking about in the Odric deck tech. How when you're playing mono white and when you're primarily an aggro deck, it is good to have some alt win cons in the deck. And Felidar Sovereign might seem like a bit of a cheesy win con to some people because, you know, you start with 40 life in Commander, so all you have to do is play it and have it still be around on your next upkeep. But honestly, that in itself is still difficult. Like, your life total can yo-yo very easily in Commander. People can do counter spells, as we just saw, you know, and it doesn't have any inherent protection. Costs 6 mana. So, yeah. But I wasn't salty about it being countered. I thought, you know, if it gets countered, then that's exactly what they should be doing, because otherwise they would lose. But yeah, I just thought I'd try it, risk it for a chocolate biscuit, and didn't get it. Fair enough. So this, though, all slivers have shadow, is a huge problem. And this as well is where I was noticing the sort of teaming up thing. So the Kraj player is actually putting +1/+1 counters on the slithers as well. And now I can't even block them because they all have shadow. So the fact that my board will have indestructible during combat just doesn't matter. So it's becoming a bit of a race, essentially. Unfortunately for us, it's a hard race to win because of the whole indestructible and shadow thing. But we do have one of my favourite includes in the deck, Angelic Overseer. As long as you control a human, Angelic Overseer has hexproof and indestructible, and she's a flying angel. So with Odric and her out, you're going to be spreading flying, indestructible and hexproof to the whole board during and after combat, which is really nice. I feel like they're meant to be together. They're both from Innistrad. Beautiful artwork, so very flavorful include. However, our opponent Kraj, their pesky contagion engine, has already got -1 counters on our creatures and is just proliferating, which gets around indestructible and hexproof. So the salt here is kind of real for me. I'm just a bit like, well, I'm screwed. Like, if I don't try and kill this Kraj player as soon as possible, they're literally going to just be able to weaken and kill all of my creatures whilst buffing their own and my opponents. So I'm really just in a bad spot. Skeleton Key, though, letting us do some looting, see if we can draw into any answers to help us. Thundering Chariot unfortunately doesn't do much here, but it is a haste enabler if we draw into something more spicy later on. Mayel, I think that's how you say it now. Mayel's Aria is doing some work in terms of just giving them a bit of value here and there. And now we see a Harmonious Sliver, which is scary. It's basically the Aura Shard Sliver. Whenever a Sliver comes into play, destroy target artifact or enchantment. And of course, whose artifacts and enchantments are they going to target but our own? We are getting some draws off Mangara though, which is great. Again, I have a love-hate relationship with Mangara. I was very excited when it was first teased. The only real issue that I have with it is just that it's surprising how often players, even in Commander of all formats, will only play one spell per turn. So you don't always get that much card draw off it. But again, we're in mono white, and we have to use what we can. And he does provide lifelink for the crew, so definitely a worthy include. Here we're seeing more of Kraj's one-sided hatred, literally proliferating, the slivers and proliferating the negative counters, or -1/-1s on my board. So we're just gradually losing everything. They did say in the chat, like, oh, you know, I'm buffing the slivers because they probably have like a will breaker or something, where they were saying, oh, I'm going to steal them, and when I steal them, I want them to be strong. So I was getting sassy at this point in the chat, and I was like, babes, you're not going to live to the point where you're going to be stealing any creatures, because I'm gunning for you. But yeah, it's just, this stuff kind of happens sometimes with Commander. You know, it gets to the point of no return where you can't really renegotiate or call a truce, because, you know, in this case, the Sliver player just will likely get the win. But especially when it's 3 players, it's hard to really negotiate too much. There'll be one player that will usually be the sort of biggest threat and will get targeted. Or if someone is feeling like they've lost, they'll have the privilege and honor of choosing who they want to help win.
Wait, please.
So, unfortunately, despite Kraj's best efforts, I do manage to stomp him out of existence with my army, which honestly was satisfying. But yeah, I had to remind myself that if I was in their position, I would probably do similar, if not the same, to what they did. So I really, you know, sometimes you do have to not be so me with Commander. I've definitely been guilty of that. And you know, think about why your opponents are doing what they're doing. You know, if they're doing it because it's their best move, then can you really fault that? Not really. So yeah, GG to them. And now at this point, we're in a real pickle, because our opponent still has Shadow Slivers. We did get Emiria the Sky Ruin online, which is lovely to see, and Nykthos Shrine to Nyx can also be an amazing land in this deck. But unfortunately, we're not drawing any exile removal, of which we have, I believe, Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile, maybe only. I think all of our other removal is destroy based, unfortunately. So all we can really do here is just swing at them to try and gain a bit of life back and do damage to them. But just like us, they also have life gain with their Sliver army. And it's just going to go back and forth, except their numbers and overall buffing synergy of Slivers is just going to outdo us. Yeah, but we did what we could, and it was very nice to see Saphara actually in play this time, after what happened to her in the previous game. Speaker of the Heavens as well can be an amazing card for this deck, given the right moment. But yeah, our opponent here getting lovely cascade triggers and all kinds of interactions with the slivers, and having flying and haste on one sliver as well is so good, so good. Like, haste is kind of tricky for us to get in mono white. There's obviously a few good equipments, the Thundering Chariot, but other than that, there aren't many mono white creatures that have haste. But with slivers, there are a couple, I think, a couple of slivers that give haste. So, and even if you don't have a Sliver that does it, you have all 5 colours, so you could throw in some enchantments or whatever. But yeah, here our opponent is swinging all in with the win in mind, and the win they shall have, because there's nothing I can do against Shadow Slivers. So yeah, GG opponent, good game.
Apologize with your life! Winner!
So, not a bad game. I quite enjoyed it overall, even though I think at the time I was pretty salty towards the end. There was talks of, I don't think it actually shows in the chat, but the Kraj player said that they literally hate Odric. And I said, you hate Odric, but you don't mind Slivers? Like, Slivers is definitely stronger than Odric and trying to do a similar thing in the vein of, you know, buffing an army with lots of keywords. But, you know, they can have their opinion. I don't want to have a super long post-game analysis because this was already quite a long video. But I will say that it was fun. As much as I did feel a bit frustrated at the time, you know, these things can happen. And it was a strong showing from Slivers. Lathril was also really off to a great start. They just kind of had that board wipe happen and then had to go eat. And Kraj had the potential to do a lot of shenanigans, I would imagine, but they didn't really politic with me, so they forced my hand. Anyway, I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, please do like, leave a comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I hope to see you soon in the next one. Bye!